There will come a day when those who walked away from you, doubted you, and overlooked your worth will regret it. They will remember the kindness you offered, the loyalty you gave, and the prayers you whispered for them in silence. They will realize that they took for granted the presence of someone who was sent by God as a blessing in their lives, but by then, your absence will speak louder than their late apologies. How often do we see this happen? People only seem to understand the value of something after it's gone. The friend who left, the family member who dismissed you, the relationship that crumbled when they finally opened their eyes, they see what they lost. And yet, at that moment, it is no longer theirs to have. Because when God removes you from a place where you were not valued, He is not punishing you, He is protecting you. The truth is, rejection is often redirection. When people walk away, it is not always a loss, but rather an indication that God is leading you to something better. Think about Joseph's own brothers cast him aside, believing they had rid themselves of him forever. But what they didn't know was that God was positioning him for elevation. What they meant for harm, God used for good. And one day, those same brothers stood before Joseph, needing the very one they had betrayed. Maybe you have felt that sting, the pain of being cast aside by those you loved. Maybe you have questioned your worth because of how easily they let you go. But let me remind you, your value is not determined by those who fail to recognize it. You are chosen, set apart, and destined for more than their approval. Their regret does not define you, God's plan does. So take heart, because your story is still unfolding. There will come a time when those who dismissed you will look back with sorrow, realizing that they lost someone irreplaceable. But when that day comes, you won't be waiting for them. You will be walking in the purpose that God had for you all along. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you looked back at something you once had and thought, I didn't know how good I had it until it was gone? That same realization will come to those who overlooked you, those who thought you would always be there, waiting, available, ready to give your time, energy, and love without hesitation. They will sit in quiet moments, replaying memories in their minds, and the weight of regret will settle in their hearts. The problem is, many people mistake consistency for permanence. They assume that just because you were always there, you always will be. They believe they can treat you however they please, and you'll keep showing up with the same grace, the same patience, the same open arms. But even the most giving heart reaches a point where it understands, I am worth more than this. And when that moment comes, you no longer chase people, you chase purpose. God has a way of shifting things in your life that may feel painful at first, but are necessary for your growth. When He allows certain people to leave, it's because they were never meant to stay. When doors close, it's because He has better ones waiting to open. And sometimes the same people who took you for granted will have to watch from a distance as God blesses you in ways they never imagined. The very ones who doubted you will see you rise. The truth is, some people only recognize your value when they can no longer access you. They will search for your voice in conversations, but you won't be there to respond. They will reach for the comfort of your presence, but you will have already moved forward. And in that moment, they will realize, I lost something I will never find again. But by then, God will have taken you to a place where their regret no longer matters. So don't dwell on who walked away. Don't waste your energy wondering if they will ever see your worth. Instead, focus on the one who has always seen it. Your value was never in their hands to begin with, it was in God's. And when He elevates you, no regret, no apology, and no amount of hindsight will be able to undo what He has planned for your life. There's a divine shift happening in your life, and you may not even realize it yet. God is removing people who were never meant to go where He's taking you. At first, it might feel like rejection. It might feel like loss. But what if I told you it's actually protection? What if the very people who walked away were being used to push you into your destiny? Sometimes God allows certain relationships to fade, not to hurt you, but to heal you from what was never meant to be permanent in the first place. Imagine a seed buried in the ground. It feels like darkness, isolation, and silence. But beneath the soil, something powerful has happened. It's growing, strengthening, preparing to break through. That's you. You are in a season where God is growing you in ways unseen, and those who thought they could leave you buried will one day watch as you rise. The same people who dismissed you will wish they had stayed to witness what God was doing in your life. And here's the truth many people don't understand. Not everyone who walks away does so because they don't love you some leave, because they don't know how to handle your calling. Your presence carried a weight they weren't equipped to hold. Your spirit carried an anointing they weren't ready to embrace. So they left thinking they were freeing themselves, but in reality, they were distancing themselves from a blessing, and one day they will see it. God doesn't just restore, He elevates. When He moves you forward, He does it in such a way that those who once overlooked you cannot deny His hand upon your life. They will watch from afar, wishing they had valued you when they had the chance. But by then, you won't be waiting for them to notice. You'll be walking in the fullness of God's promise. You won't be bitter. You won't be resentful. You'll be blessed, and that will be enough. So let this be a moment of release for you. Let go of the pain of being unappreciated. Let go of the frustration of feeling unseen. God saw you the entire time. And while some may regret losing you, your focus is not on their regret, it's on the future God is preparing for you, because what's ahead is far greater than anything left behind. Have you ever wondered why people only seem to appreciate something after it's gone? Why is it that the same people who took you for granted suddenly realize your worth the moment you are no longer available? Is it human nature, or is there something deeper at work? The truth is, many people don't value what they assume they'll never lose. They believe your kindness, your loyalty, and your presence are things they can always return until they find out they were wrong. It's painful, isn't it? To give your heart, your time, your energy, only to be treated like you were just another option. To be there for people in their lowest moments, only for them to walk away when you needed them the most. And when you finally gather the strength to move on, that's when they realize what they lost. But by then, it's too late. This cycle repeats itself over and over. And if you're not careful, it can make you bitter, resentful, and even doubtful of your own worth. But let me tell you something. This is not just a coincidence, it's spiritual. The enemy wants you to believe that being abandoned means you are not enough. That being overlooked means you are not worthy. But that is a lie. The Bible warns us about people who fail to recognize the blessings placed in their lives. Even Jesus Himself was rejected by those He came to save. In the second book of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, He came to His own, but His own received Him not. If even the Son of God was rejected, what makes us think we won't experience the same? And here's the danger: when people refuse to see your worth, they miss out on what God placed in you for them. Sometimes the loss they experience is not just emotional, it's spiritual. There are blessings tied to certain relationships, and when people mistreat or dismiss those God has sent, they unknowingly walk away from the favor that came with them. Just like the brothers of Joseph, who thought they were ridding themselves of him, only to later stand before him in desperation, needing the very one they cast aside. So let me ask you this. Are you allowing the pain of rejection to define you, or are you letting God use it to refine you? Are you clinging to those who don't see your value, or are you trusting that God will align you with those who do? Because the truth is, their regret is coming, but by the time it does, you'll already be walking in the purpose God had for you all along. One of the greatest traps the enemy sets is making you believe that being rejected means you are not worthy. That because someone let you go, ignored you, or failed to appreciate you, somehow you were not enough. But let me remind you, Jesus Himself was rejected not because He lacked value, but because people could not recognize who He truly was. And the same happens to you. People fail to see your heart, your loyalty, and your worth until the day you are no longer within reach. Think about Judas. He walked with Jesus, sat at His table, and witnessed His miracles firsthand. Yet for a handful of silver, he traded the greatest relationship he ever had. And what happened after? When Judas realized the depth of what he had done, regret consumed him. He returned the silver, but it was too late. He had already lost what could never be replaced. This is what happens when people fail to recognize a God-ordained presence in their lives. They trade something priceless for something temporary, and when their eyes finally open, the opportunity is gone. How many times have you poured into people who only gave you emptiness in return? How many times have you gone out of your way for those who couldn't even meet you halfway? You loved them, supported them, believed in them, only to be left feeling unseen. But here's the truth. It wasn't that you weren't enough. It's that they weren't ready to receive what you had to give. And when people aren't prepared for the blessing, they mishandle it, they discard it, and later they regret it. But let's be honest, regret changes nothing once the door is closed. Many people will wish they had treated you differently, but by the time they do, you will have already outgrown that season. You will have already healed, already moved forward, already stepped into the greater things God has for you. Their realization will not be your responsibility. Their regret will not be your burden to carry. So the real question is this: will you allow their blindness to keep you stuck, or will you trust that God is leading you into something better? Will you wait around hoping they wake up, or will you walk confidently into the next chapter God has written for you? Because one day they will regret losing you, but by then you will be too blessed to look back. The hardest thing to accept is that some people never realize your worth until they no longer have access to you. It's not that they didn't see your kindness, your patience, or your love. It's that they assumed it would always be there. They mistook your presence for permanence, and they thought they had unlimited chances to treat you however they pleased. But now the seat they once occupied in your life is empty, and they are left with nothing but memories and regret. Regret is a powerful thing. It wakes people up in the middle of the night, forcing them to relive moments they wish they had handled differently. It plays in their minds like a song on repeat, reminding them of the love they took for granted, the loyalty they mistreated, and the prayers they no longer have covering them. When they see you thriving without them, when they realize that someone else now benefits from what they once had, the weight of their choices will become unbearable. Look at the story of the prodigal son. In the second book of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, he squandered his inheritance in reckless living, and when he had spent everything, he began to be in need. The son thought he didn't need what he had until he lost it. Only when he was at his lowest did he realize the value of what he walked away from. And that's exactly how some people will feel about you. They didn't appreciate your presence when they had it, but when they feel the emptiness left behind, they will wish they had treated you differently. But here's what you need to understand. Their regret does not mean you have to open the door again. Just because someone finally sees your worth does not mean they deserve a second chance. Growth means learning from the past and recognizing that not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Yes, forgive them. Yes, wish them well. But also understand that not everyone who loses you should have the privilege of finding you again. So stop waiting for closure, stop wondering if they will ever realize what they lost, and stop expecting them to make things right. Because the truth is, God is your vindicator. He saw the times you cried in silence. He saw the times you felt unappreciated, and now he is preparing something greater for you. Their regret will come, but by then you will already be walking in your victory. So what do you do when people regret losing you? Do you wait for them to come back? Do you open the door again, hoping they've changed? You shift your focus from their regret to God's plan. You don't live for their apologies. You live for God's purpose. Your worth has never been in their hands. It has always been in His. And when God removes someone from your life, He does it with intention. It's not rejection, it's redirection. It's not punishment, it's protection. The Bible gives us clear signs that God is leading us into something greater. One of those signs is when He allows relationships to end despite your best efforts. At the moment, it may hurt. It may not make sense. But later, when you look back, you will see that everything had a purpose. God was not taking something from you. He was making room for something better. Another sign is when peace follows your decision to move on. Have you ever noticed how much lighter you feel when you finally release what was weighing you down? When you stop chasing people who were never meant to stay, God replaces that void with something far greater: His presence, His favor, and new relationships that align with your purpose. The peace that comes after letting go is confirmation that you made the right choice. And then there's restoration. When God restores you, He doesn't just bring you back to where you were, He takes you further. Joseph was betrayed and abandoned by his own brothers, but he didn't spend his life trying to make them regret it. Instead, he trusted God, and in the end, he was placed in a position of power where his enemies had no choice but to recognize what they had lost. God's way of vindicating you is not through revenge, it's through elevation. So what's the next step for you? Keep walking, keep trusting, keep believing. Don't dwell on who regrets losing you. Focus on the God who is taking you to greater heights. Their regret is their lesson to learn, not yours to carry. Your job is to move forward with faith, knowing that what's ahead is far greater than anything left behind. One of the greatest signs that God is shifting your life is when people who once overlooked you begin to see what they lost, but don't let their regret distract you. Your growth is not about proving anything to them. It's about walking in the purpose God designed for you. If you spend your time waiting for people to acknowledge your worth, you will delay the blessings that are already on their way. Keep your eyes forward, because what God has prepared is far greater than what you left behind. Think about David. He was rejected, underestimated, even forgotten by his own family. But did he fight for their approval? Number, he remained faithful, and in time, God positioned him as king. The same people who once dismissed him had no choice but to recognize God's hand on his life. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. That means what others discard, God elevates. If they walked away from you, it's because they weren't meant to be part of the masterpiece God is building in you. Let's be honest, when people regret losing you, they may try to come back. They may reach out with apologies, trying to mend what they once ignored. But here's where wisdom comes in. Not every door that reopens should be walked through again. Forgiveness is biblical, but restoration is optional. Some people are meant to be loved from a distance. Let God guide you in discernment, knowing that your future is too valuable to be placed in the hands of those who mishandled you before. And here's something you need to hear. You do not have to lower yourself just to be accepted by those who once rejected you. You don't have to shrink to fit into spaces God has already outgrown in your life. Elevation requires separation. God is setting you apart for a reason, and if some people couldn't see your worth when they had access to you, that is not your burden to fix. Their regret is not your responsibility. Your growth is. So stand firm in your faith. Do not waver. Do not look back. What's ahead is filled with purpose, joy, and new opportunities that align with your destiny. When God restores, He doesn't bring you back to where you were. He takes you to a place beyond your imagination. Their regret is a chapter in their story, but your victory is the beginning of a brand new book that God is writing just for you. Now, take a deep breath and listen to, may you are not what they made you feel. You are not defined by who left, who ignored you, or who failed to see your worth. You are defined by the God who created you, the one who knew your value before anyone else did. People may have walked away, but God never did. He was with you in the silence, in the heartbreak, in the lonely nights when you wondered if you mattered. And today, He is telling you you were never forgotten. I need you to hear this. What hurt you was not meant to break you. It was meant to shape you. The pain of rejection, the sting of being undervalued, it all served a purpose. Like gold refined in fire, you have been through the heat, but you are coming out stronger, purer, more prepared for the destiny that awaits you. The very thing they thought would destroy you is the very thing God is using to elevate you. What they lost in you, someone else will treasure. And here's the truth. You are stepping into a season where you won't have to prove your worth to anyone. God is bringing the right people, the right opportunities, and the right doors into your life phones that don't require you to beg for appreciation. The ones who regret losing you will watch as God blesses you in ways they never imagined. But by then, you won't even be looking back. You'll be too busy walking in your victory. This is your moment to rise. This is your confirmation that God is doing something greater. No more crying over people who chose to walk away. No more questioning if you were enough. You are always enough. Their inability to see your value was never a reflection of you. It was a revelation of them. And now God is turning everything around for your good. You are stepping into restoration. You are stepping into joy. You are stepping into favor. So I ask you, are you ready? Are you ready to let go of the past and embrace the future God has for you? Are you ready to stop dwelling on their regret and start rejoicing in your purpose? Because this is your time. Your story is not over. Your best days are ahead. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can stop what God is about to do in your life. Let this truth settle in your heart. God is not just healing you, He is elevating you. The pain, the rejection, the silent battles you fought, none of it was in vain. Every tear you shed was seen by the one who never abandoned you. Every moment you felt unseen, He was working behind the scenes. And now the time is coming when those who overlooked you will have no choice but to witness what God is doing in your life. Imagine the moment Joseph's brothers stood before him, desperate and hungry, not realizing that the very one they betrayed was now the one who held their future in his hands. That's what happens when God's favor is upon you. Those who doubted you will have to acknowledge His power in your life. But listen, you won't even need their validation anymore. When God lifts you up, no one can deny His hand on you, but by then their opinion won't even matter. Some of you have been waiting for closure, for an apology, for a moment when those who hurt you finally admit what they did. But what if I told you that you don't need it? The closure you are waiting for is already here. It's in God's confirmation that you are chosen, that you are loved, that you are stepping into something greater. Stop waiting for people to recognize your worth. God already has. And He's taking you to a place where no apology is required because the blessings ahead will be enough. So what will you do? Will you keep looking back, wondering if they'll regret losing you? Or will you lift your head, stand in confidence, and step into the new things God is calling you to? Because the choice is yours. You can stay stuck in the pain of what happened, or you can embrace the joy of what's coming, and what's coming is far greater than what you left behind. This is your breakthrough moment, the moment where you choose to stop looking for approval from those who were never meant to see your worth, the moment where you stop living in regret and start living in faith. Because one day they will regret losing you, but by then you will be too blessed, too healed, and too fulfilled to even notice. Listen, a mere future is too important to waste time worrying about their regret. God has placed too much inside of you, prepared too much ahead of you for you to be stuck in the past. Yes, it hurt. Yes, you gave your best and they didn't see it, but now God is calling you forward. Will you answer, or will you keep waiting for people to validate what God already declared over your life? There's a reason why some people couldn't stay. There's a reason why certain doors closed. If they were meant to be part of your destiny, they would have remained. But God saw what you couldn't. He saw who wasn't for you. He saw the betrayal before it happened. He saw the conversations you didn't hear. And instead of letting you stay in a place that would eventually destroy you, He pulled you out. What you thought was rejection was actually divine protection. Now, it's your turn to let go, to stop replaying what they did, to stop wondering what could have been. Because while you're looking back, God is preparing something new. He is bringing people into your life who won't need to lose you to see your worth. People who will cherish your presence, who will value your time, who will love you the way you were always meant to be loved. But you have to release the past so you can receive the future. And when the moment comes, when those who left realize what they lost, you won't be bitter. You won't be resentful. You won't even need to prove anything. Because by then, God's blessings will be your loudest testimony. The favor on your life will speak for itself. And the best part, you won't even be looking back to see their regret because you'll be too focused on what God has ahead. So hear me, this is your time to rise, to step into the identity God has given you, to embrace the calling He has placed on your life. No more waiting for people to see what God already knew. No more looking back. No more wondering what if. Your future is calling, and it's time to walk into it with boldness. Because one day they will regret losing you, but by then you'll be too far ahead to even notice. So what will you choose today? Will you keep looking back, waiting for people to recognize your worth, or will you step boldly into the future God has prepared for you? Because the truth is, your life is not meant to be lived in reverse. You are not called to sit in regret, waiting for apologies that may never come. You are called to move forward, to grow, to thrive, and to embrace the purpose that God has placed inside of you. Let this be the day you release it all. Release the pain, release the questions, release the need for closure. You don't need their validation because God has already validated you. You don't need their approval because God has already chosen you. And you certainly don't need to wait for their regret, because by the time they realize what they lost, God will have already placed you in a season so abundant that looking back won't even be an option. Mark my words, your best days are ahead, not behind. The love you deserve, it's coming. The opportunities you've been waiting for, they're on the way. The peace, the joy, the fulfillment that your heart longs for, God is preparing it right now, but He needs you to do one thing. Stop holding on to what He already told you to let go of. Trust Him. Trust that if someone was removed from your life, it was for your good. Trust that what He is bringing will be so much greater than what was lost. Stand firm in your faith. The pain of being overlooked, the sting of being cast aside, it's all temporary, but the plans of God, they are eternal. He is the God of restoration, the God of redemption, the God who turns pain into purpose and loss into legacy. When you walk with Him, you never truly lose, because what's ahead is always greater than what's behind. So walk forward, hold your head high, let them regret losing you, but don't you dare regret walking away. Because where God is taking you, there is no room for regret, only glory, only grace, and only the kind of joy that no one can take away. This is your time. Step into it. This is your confirmation. You don't need to go back to what God has already freed you from. Their regret is not your burden to carry. Their realization does not mean you have to reopen a door that God intentionally closed. You are moving forward. You are stepping into something better. And when God shifts your life, there is no turning back. Let this be the moment where you fully embrace what God is doing in you. No more second guessing. No more wondering if you should have done more. No more questioning if you were enough. You were always enough. The ones who couldn't see it, the ones who didn't appreciate it, that was their loss, not yours. And one day they will realize it. But by then, you will be walking in so much peace and favor that their regret will be nothing more than a distant echo. God is writing a new chapter in your life. Stop trying to rewrite the last one. Let it be. Let the past stay in the past, because your story isn't over. It's just beginning. And the next part, it's going to be filled with open doors, divine connections, and blessings that will make you understand why certain things had to end. What's coming will make sense of everything you thought you lost. So today, choose faith over fear. Choose growth over regret. Choose God's plan over your past, because when you trust Him, you never truly lose. He always replaces what was taken with something far greater. The ones who walked away, the ones who didn't value you, the ones who didn't see your worth, they will regret losing you, but you will be too blessed to even notice. Now take a deep breath and step forward. Your future is waiting. Your destiny is calling. And with God leading the way, there is nothing ahead of you but victory.